In Swift, there are two type categories, the reference and value types. Objects that are classes are reference types, while struct and enums are value types. We are encouraged to use mostly value types because it's easier to reason the changes or mutation that is happening in your code. As your code becomes larger and complex, following the flow of data and the changes happening becomes more difficult. With value types, for example, given a size struct, when it is mutated by an object, you can be sure that no other object is mutating the size value type instance. With reference type, you can't immediately determine who is mutating an object, especially in a multi-threaded application, where several objects can have access to that reference type. When we're talking about multi-threading, just imagine several people are tasked to work on an object. These people can be instructed to work at the same time or after the other. Delegating several people to work on one object or data can have unexpected results unless proper control measures is in place. So in Swift, the choice between value and reference types will matter in avoiding or minimizing issues in complex scenarios. Here's a quick guide that will help you in choosing between a value type or a reference type. First, you will want to use a value type if you want to compare the data or property values of instances of a value type. Second, if you want that the instances are independent of the other object state. If a property of the first object is changed and you want to be sure that the second copy is not affected by this change. You may be running different tasks in different threads, and choosing to use a value type will help in ensuring safety and avoiding difficult to find bugs in multi-threaded apps. With reference types, there are a couple of easy to follow guidelines. First, if at some point you want to compare the identity of objects, you want to know if the instance you created is actually the same instance as the other object. Second, when you want the state of a reference type to be observed by several objects and receive the same state. Imagine you have one instance of a reference type, then it is used on several areas of the app. Whenever a property of the reference type instance would change, you would expect that the other objects that depends on this instance will receive the same value or state. So whenever you need to choose between a reference type or a value type, just refer to these guidelines. Through this simple example, I'm going to demonstrate the distinguishing feature of a reference type. Consider this person class that has one property called name that is of a string type. On line 7, the person instance is created and it is set to the James constant. Then on line 8, we set the name property with a string value. On line 9, we are printing the name property. Then on line 11, a new constant JamesRef was created and it is set with the James constant, and then the name property is also printed. On line 15, we use the JamesRef constant and set the name property with a new value by adding a last name. In the next two lines, we are printing the name properties of both James and JamesRef to see the effect of the modification that was done on line 15. Let us head over to the printed output. On the first print output, the first name is printed even after the assignment of James to JamesRef. While on the third and fourth print outputs, we can see that both James and JamesRef name properties have the same value. It is the same value because JamesRef is just referencing the James person instance. Even you assign the James instance on multiple variables, it will still refer to the same James person instance. Therefore, you are just passing an instance by reference. Now let us look at a value type example. Instead, as a class, we modified the person type to a struct. On line 36, a person instance was created with a name value. Then on line 39, the James instance is set to another constant called James copy. Then on line 42, we changed the name property of the James variable. Then we printed both instances name properties. In the output, we can see that the same James string is printed before and after the instance assignment to James copy. While on the third and fourth lines, we can see different name values. You can see that only the James instance got the last name. The changes on the first instance or the James variable is only for the James variable, and it has no effect on other copies of it. The James copy is a new instance that only copied the data of the James variable. It means we now have two instances, unlike in the class example, we are only referencing one instance. I hope by now you have a better understanding of the difference between a reference type and a value type.